We're 2.5 hours away from fulfilling a promise, not just a promise to our troops, but to our country. Today's vote said that if you want to discriminate, it has no place in America. It has no place in the armed forces. It said that we don't care who you love as long as you love your country. Repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell is the right thing to do, and if that were the only argument, that would be enough. But it's more than that. Repealing this policy will make our military stronger. Some have said this is not the time to repeal this policy, and they're right. It should have been done yesterday. Now, some are saying that because we're repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, they're going to retaliate by voting against the New START treaty. Now, focus on that just for a minute, folks. They're going to vote against this international treaty dealing with nuclear weapons because they had to vote on the DREAM Act and Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, that's real statesmanship. They're saying that because we're making our military stronger by outlawing discrimination, they want to make America weaker by making it easier for terrorists to get nuclear weapons. The only thing these two votes have to do with each other is that they both strengthen America. If you either want our military to reflect the justice it fights for or you don't, it's simple as that. You either want our military to reflect the justice of our great country or you don't. We're constantly working to help our nation live up to its promise. We're always moving toward a more perfect union. Today, we move one step closer to that more perfect union. We're going to hear now from Joe Lieberman, who has been terrific in this regard. I also have to acknowledge, even though he may not speak, he is Chairman Carl Levin. Carl Levin, Advocacy, as Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, is the reason we had Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the Armed Services Bill, the Armed Service Authorization Bill. And everyone knows, had he not done that, we would not be here today. And Joe Lieberman, I appreciate very much his advocacy, helping us bring those few Republicans in. And I appreciate those few Republicans. We could not have done it without them. And they are brave in doing so with the pressure that they have received and will receive. We're going to hear from Joe Solmonese, the President of the Human Rights Campaign, Aubrey Sarvis. By the way, as I mentioned to some people earlier today, he has great Nevada connections. He worked for a long, long time for Senator Howard Kent in Nevada. Aubrey is the Executive Director of the Service Members Legal Defense Fund. And then we're going to hear from Mike Almy, who is a discharged Air Force Major. Joe?
Thanks very much, Harry. Your words were right on target, and I don't actually have much to add except to thank you for your leadership. Without your commitment to get Don't Ask, Don't Tell repealed, this wouldn't have happened today. You worked with us. When you realized that we had the votes, you said, I'm not going to let the opponents of repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell run out the clock on us. This is too important. You filed cloture. You brought it to a vote. And the result was there after the vote today. I also want to join you in thanking my chairman on the Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin, for his leadership, principled leadership throughout this. My colleagues, I almost said Mo. Well, Mo's here, really. Your dad is here in spirit. I remember talking to him about this in 1976, and he was right there on the right side. Senator Mark Udall, Senator Kristen Gillibrand, who stood with me throughout. And I want to thank the 6 Republicans who bucked what seemed like a party position, but it shouldn't be a party position. Repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell is the right thing to do, whether you're liberal, conservative, Democrat, or Republican. It's consistent with the best American values. And so I want to thank Senator Susan Collins and Olympia Snowe, Lisa Murkowski, Scott Brown. And people ask me, you keep saying you might have a few we don't know about. Mark Kirk and George Voinovich came through today. And finally, to thank Joe and the Human Rights Campaign and Aubrey and the Service Members Legal Defense Fund. Part of why this passed is because gay and lesbian Americans in this era of our history have really organized to utilize their First Amendment rights to petition our government. And they very effectively made the case for the injustice of Don't Ask, Don't Tell here in Washington, but really throughout the country, speaking to senators where they live about why this law should be changed. And as a result, for all of us in the Senate, this is one of those days when we really feel privileged to be here because we righted a wrong. It took too long, but remember Dr. King said the moral arc of the universe may bend slowly, but it always bends toward justice. Today, we've done justice. Joe?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Reid, thank you for your leadership on this issue. We would not be here today without the steadfast commitment of Senators Lieberman and Susan Collins, and we are indebted to both senators for their leadership in getting us to this moment. Senator Lieberman and Collins, we thank you so much for your steadfast commitment. It is also important that we recognize all of the heroic members of Congress who brought us to this day, Senator Udall, Senator Leahy, who is just here, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Levin, and so many others. Don't Ask, Don't Tell will soon be relegated to the dustbin of history, and a stain on our nation will be lifted forever. Today, America lived up to its highest ideals of freedom and equality when the Senate voted to move our national security and our country forward. Today, the federal government recognized that all men and women have the right to openly serve the country they believe in, that it doesn't matter who you are or who you love, you are not a second-class citizen any longer. For the 17 years that this failed law has been in place, over 14,000 dedicated service members have been discharged simply because of their sexual orientation. And it is most important today to stop and honor those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines whose military careers were ended, whose lives were threatened, whose friendships were cut short, all because of a failed law that failed them and our country's national security and our best interests. They can never get those years back, but I hope they know that their sacrifice meant something. I hope they know that their courage and their integrity helped a nation understand what it means to serve, and I hope they know that more than anything else, they helped bring about this historic change. America made history today. As gay men and lesbians, we are grateful that our nation recognized that we should be able to serve our nation openly and honestly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aubrey Sarvis, Executive Director of SLDN, Service Members Legal Defense Network. We were created over 17 years ago when Congress enacted Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And since that time, we have provided legal counsel to over 10,000 service members who have been discharged or adversely impacted by this law. Today's vote means gay and lesbian service members posted all around the world can stand taller, knowing Don't Ask, Don't Tell should soon be coming to an end. This vote gives the Pentagon and the President a clear path and the tools for getting rid of the military gay ban, and it paves the way for ending all employment discrimination. But I need to put my lawyer's hat on for a moment, especially to our clients who are listening. Repeal is not yet final. The President will sign this bill shortly. The certification process must go forward, and the 60-day congressional period must go forward as well. During this limbo interim period, I respectfully call upon the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Gates, to use his existing authority to suspend all investigations and all discharges until the law is finally repealed. I have known Senator Reid for over 40 years, and I can tell you that this man has been determined to repeal this law in this Congress, and he has made good on his word. And today we all owe a great gratitude to Senator Reid and for his determined leadership and tenacity. Thank you, Senator Reid. And thank you all senators, especially to Senator Lieberman, to Senator Levin, to Senator Udall, Senator Gillibrand. Did I forget anyone? Thank you, everyone in the Senate. Okay. All right.
Leader, on a point of personal privilege, I just want to say 2 words before Major Mike Almy comes up here. For us, this and the public, this may be an issue to be debated, a piece of legislation to act on. For Major Mike Almy and about 14,000 other American servicemen and women, this was and is their life. And when you hear his story, if you have not, you will feel how unjust the current policy has been to real people, real American patriots, real American heroes, and how important what we're going to do today really will be. Major Mike.
That's quite an introduction there, Senator. Wow, what a day. Long time in the making, a long, hard process, years in the making through a hard fight through dozens, hundreds of men and women. Strong, courageous leaders in our Senate, in the House, have made this day possible. Don't Ask, Don't Tell is the only law left in America today that mandates that someone be fired simply because of who they are. Not because they've committed a crime or they've done something wrong, just because of who they are. Today we took a huge, historic step to ending that discrimination and treating gay and lesbian Americans no longer as second-class citizens, unworthy to defend our nation as they are, sacrificing their honor and integrity. But now, pretty soon, they will be able to serve equally, as competently, alongside their straight counterparts with honesty and integrity, and not have to sacrifice their personal values every day. I served as an officer in the Air Force for 13 years. Through 4 deployments to the Middle East, I led a team of nearly 200 men and women in Iraq, in a squadron that controlled the airspace over the vast majority of Iraq. We were there controlling the airspace when the Marines went into Fallujah and liberated that city. We faced nearly daily mortar attacks, one of which struck my site, damaging a significant amount of our equipment, as well as injuring one of my own troops, who was thankfully returned to duty a few weeks later. While I was in Iraq, I wrote private personal emails to family and friends, to loved ones, to someone I had dated, no different from my straight counterparts in my squadron. I did this to keep in touch with loved ones far away and to help ease the stress of a combat zone. Shortly after I left Iraq, someone in the unit that replaced mine inadvertently stumbled upon those private emails, which I thought I had deleted. They proceeded to read them. The Air Force in Iraq, during the height of the insurgency, took time out from the war to search my private emails, solely to determine if I had violated Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and to gather whatever evidence they could use against me. 6 weeks after I had returned from Iraq, I was back in Germany, where I was stationed at the time. My commander called me into his office. He read me the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy and handed me that stack of emails and said, "How do you explain these?" The Air Force asked, or rather demanded, that I tell them, and I refused to answer the question. Not once in my 13-year career as an officer, or during the 16-month discharge process that followed, did I make a statement to the military that violated Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Despite this, I was fired from my job leading nearly 200 men and women, which had a complete disruptive negative effect on my unit, on the mission, and our ability to get the job done. My security clearance was suspended, part of my pay was terminated, and then 16 months later, I was finally thrown out of the Air Force and given a police escort from the base on my final day of active duty, as if I were a common criminal or a threat to national security. Despite all this, about a year into the process, after I had been fired, the Air Force actually recommended I be promoted to lieutenant colonel. In recognition of my performance, my leadership, and my abilities as an officer, despite the fact that they were actively trying to throw me out because of this discriminatory law, they still recommended I be promoted to the next higher grade. There is nothing that I want more than to resume my career as an officer and a leader in the Air Force. And the estimated 66,000 gay and lesbian Americans who are wearing the uniform today in defense of our nation, they just want the simple assurance that they're not going to be fired solely because of who they are. Today in the Senate, we took a huge step forward to making that a reality. I look forward to this final vote and then eventually the President signing this into law and I look forward to wearing the uniform once again of an officer of the United States Air Force. Thank you.
We'll take some questions.
Call for a suspension of investigations.
Yes.
Do you have commitment from Republicans to hold the vote at 3 o'clock today?
Yes.
And,
There's an order already been entered in the Senate.
Okay. And also, you mentioned the START treaty earlier today. How do you see that playing out in the next few days following the vote later today?
We're going to work till we complete work. We're going to complete work on the START treaty.
Any timing or?
No, timing's not. It's up to those who. I want to make sure everyone feels they're not being jammed on the START treaty. I would hope that people are constructive. We're now on the 5th day of work on the START treaty. There will be more work done this afternoon, tomorrow. So that is the way I count. We're up to 6 or 7 days for sure. And I would hope we're going to have a vote this afternoon on one of the amendments that have been offered. And I hope other amendments will be offered. I understand that Senator Rich is going to offer one today. So I want this to go forward. I am a strong believer in the START treaty. To think that the two nations who control more than 90% of the nuclear warheads, to think they've gotten together, they want to lower the amount of warheads each has. They've done this in agreeable fashion. We have problems all over the world. In Iran, North Korea, situation in Iran, the situation, of course, in Afghanistan. To think that we wouldn't confirm this treaty, ratify this treaty, I should say, is really scary. And to have people running around saying, I poisoned the well by having 2 votes on the DREAM Act and don't ask, don't tell. I mean, I just can't, I am not able to function and try to understand with reason why anyone would say that. Yes.
Senator, do you have the 67 votes to get it ratified, first of all? And second off, do you plan on bringing the defense authorization bill up, and how will you handle that this weekend?
First question, I have not counted votes on the START treaty. I hope that's the case. That hasn't been my responsibility. Senator Kerry has been leading the charge in that. I've gone over names with him, and I think that question will be better directed toward him and or Vice President Biden or the President. As far as the defense bill, the House has trimmed it down. Some of the things they took out, I wish they hadn't, but they did, and I support that. And I would hope we could get unanimous consent over here to pass it.
Are you here tomorrow? Anytime?
Well, before we leave here, for sure.
Senator Reid and Senator Levin, how long do you expect certification to take before the actual repeal will be lifted?
We don't have an estimate on that. We have a commitment that during that process that there'll be close consultation between the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, and the chiefs of the various services. But we don't have an estimate as to how long that will take. We hope it'll be sooner rather than later. And in that regard, I want to pay tribute to our top military leadership here. I want to pay tribute to Secretary Gates and to Admiral Mullen. Admiral Mullen's comment from the heart, which really, I think, moved our committee and moved the country, that this is a matter of integrity, that nobody wearing the uniform of the United States of America should have to be living a lie. They should not be able to, they should be able to be who they are. And his comment about integrity and people wearing the uniform of this country, and that's important to everyone in uniform, gay or straight, that everyone wearing the uniform be able to be honest about who they are, really gave momentum to this effort. And I want to pay tribute to Admiral Mullen and to Secretary Gates, and both of them have pointed out, and this goes back to your question, this is a leadership issue. Making this change is simply a matter of leadership. Doing the right thing here is a leadership matter, and they have all said, including the chiefs who were leery about this, said, you make this decision, it will be implemented. I hope it'll be implemented promptly.
Thanks, everybody.